Hello, everyone. My name is Sarah Call, and I'm with the Travel and Tourism Research Association. TTRA unites the best and brightest in the travel and tourism industry, and we are so happy to have you all here with us today. Today, we welcome Kenton Barello and Brian Reitz from YouGov, who will be navigating us through the Trump effect on international travel to the U.S. Before we dive on into it, I wanted to announce that TTRA has an exciting new opportunity for members that we will be sharing at the end of this webinar, so be sure to stay tuned. If you are interested in becoming a member, we encourage you to check out our website at ttra.com, and you are always welcome to reach out to me at admin@ttra.com as well if you have any questions. Now I'll go ahead and hand this over to Kenton and Brian.
Okay, thank you so much. And for everyone attending, really appreciate you making the time today, whether it's live or hopefully virtual as well. We really value our partnership with TTRA, and we're excited to be meeting with you today. So let's dig into it. Navigating the Trump effect on international travel towards the U.S. So you've got myself, Kenton Barello. I've been here with YouGov for 6+ years, working several years with DMOs, also working with TTRA, which we're very excited about. And then we've got Brian Ritz on the call as well, our senior marketing manager. Want to give him a special shout out because he put together the majority of the content along with our research team. And we're really excited to get into it today.
Yeah, and just a quick note too is we know that this is a bit of for some, an emotional subject. That's partially why it's so interesting. YouGov has a very firm objective policy. We're trying our hardest to be objective. We are not here to do anything political. We are just trying to firmly understand the reality of what's going on, and that's the lens that we're taking through this. So, feel free to ask any questions throughout if you're worried that we aren't being objective, and we'll either do our best to talk about our approach to it, or just talk maybe admit to any biases we didn't realize we had. So I guess without any further ado, I'll pass it back to you, Kenton.
All right, so let's get into it. We'll take a quick look at methodology. We'll look at initial reactions post 2024 election. Then we'll look at current global trends. We'll zoom in on key travel markets for the US, and we'll end with some fun stuff on the ever evolving US international visitor, followed by a light Q&A. With that said, let's get into it. So YouGov, when we look at this slide, we have we're a full service market research firm. So the core of what we do, all this research is backed by our panel, highly regarded, one of the most well-respected data panels out there. We're tracking in 50+ markets, and we have a lot of different solutions. So one of the core things that we look at, this first thing was an omnibus survey. We ran one in December across 16 countries. We followed that up in February 2025, looking at 3 core markets for US travel. We know Canada, Great Britain, Mexico, typically really important markets for international travel, so we zoomed in on those. We also used our destination index. This is effectively a subcomponent of our daily brand health tracker designed specifically for destinations, DMOs. Again, we're taking a look at 30+ markets that we're tracking, I think 29 in terms of travel intent for the US, also drilling into those other specific markets. We also leverage global travel profiles. Think of this as a syndicated tool which provides audience analysis specific to travel behaviors, travel preferences on a global scale with the ability to filter down to people looking at the US. We can do a lot more than that, but this is kind of the baseline for what we're looking at. We'll do our best as we go through the slides to make sure that you're familiar and oriented with the data we're showcasing. And then with that said, I'm going to kick it over to Brian. We'll figure out, what were people saying when he got elected?
Yeah, and he being Trump, not me, not Kenton. We were not elected. We were here doing the webinar. We're the presenters. But yeah, we basically went and we asked, following the US elections in November 2024, are you more or less likely to consider visiting the US on your next international trip? This is sorted by the net likelihood. So we combine the much more likely and somewhat more likely, and then the somewhat less and much less likely. And what we see here is, at least when he was initially elected, that the net rep audiences for each of these countries, you have UAE, India, and Hong Kong have much more likely to visit, and then some European countries, Sweden, Denmark, Germany down there, much less likely. And we'll look at this a bit more in depth too.
And again, the key on this one It's really looking at from a nationally representative standpoint. So we'll kind of drill into these other audiences that are more important as we go through.
Yeah, one of those audience being passport holders. So looking at passport holders, you see just initially, first glance, a lot more green there, and the net rating a lot less red. Overall promising, still more red than you want to see as far as likelihood to visit. And again, this is when he was initially elected, right after the election. So the time frame was December 24 or December 16th, 24 through January 2nd, 2025. Election in November, inauguration mid-January. So in between that kind of phrase, and then I'll jump ahead real quick because this next slide is ordered alphabetically, but basically this is what we're looking at here. Those last two slides we saw, U.S. visit intent change by Nat Rep, and then U.S. visit intent change among passport holders, and then the difference between those two on the right. So basically what we're seeing here is what is the overall impression of the US as a travel destination among travelers versus among the average person in that country. And I guess ultimately what we're highlighting is maybe in Mexico, specifically a key travel market for the US, that even if the US sentiment is not as good, we're seeing that among passport holders specifically, it's actually improved quite a bit, which I would say was unexpected for me in this, but that's why we do this data and this research is to find that. And then similar in Indonesia, there was a really, really big gap between the Nat Rep audience and then passport holders. So we'll pause on this a little bit. So looking at the whole data set, so this is that December study again, basically sorted by age. This is every person who filled out that survey in every market, not necessarily weighted by market. So you might have more people in Great Britain, you might have than you would in say Sweden, but it's just a sample of about 1,000 per market effectively. But on the whole, what we found when we looked at whether people were more or less likely to visit the US, younger people, 18 to 34, were slightly more likely, 32% more likely, and that's again combining much more and somewhat more, and then 29% less likely. Big difference among people aged 55 plus, so just 11% more likely and 45% less likely. Any thoughts on that, Kenton?
I mean, I would get to it, but I think it's encouraging and interesting to see the younger demographic shifting towards still having an openness to come to the US.
And then finally, I know I mentioned this earlier, but it is a charged topic for many. We looked at the extreme responses here. So these are the people who answered much less likely or much more likely, and this is the global average for people who answered that. Small note, you might be able to see in the footnote there. If you can't see it, you can stick your face really close to the camera. If you're watching on your phone, put it up to your face. Or I'll say it, but basically, and we'll get the slides distributed too. But basically, the much more likely group was about half the size of the much less likely. So there's a bigger negative response than there was a positive response. But the orange adds up to 100 and the green adds up to 100. And basically, what we're seeing is across the world, people who were much more likely to consider visiting the US are men, university graduates, and higher income.
Yeah, other thing to call out here, and I think you hit this, but we're seeing middle income, higher income. We're seeing a more openness and likeliness to visit, which is encouraging. These are just a handful of demographics we pulled. There's a bunch of other variables that we can pull. We thought these would be impactful. But, as we get through the deck, if people have questions in the follow-up, we're always happy to look at it through a different lens. We can meet separately on that.
So
All
now
right.
what are people saying?
Yeah, let's get into it. So with this stuff, now what we're looking at, I believe, is our destination index. So this is our daily tracker. It's looking at a several, specifically country level destinations. You'll see here what we've done. We're looking at brand buzz. I'm sorry, destination buzz, destination impression. looking at an average across, I believe it's 29 markets that we're tracking. So think of it as all those markets that we looked at in those previous lists, we're shrinking up into one line and we're looking at overall sentiment for the United States. This is again looking at, I believe, a net rep audience, and what we're seeing is net buzz and net impression both dropping at a statistically significant mark right around January 1st. So we're not seeing it right after the election. Everything's effectively stagnant. It's pretty flat. But as we approach, this Trump going into office, right around January 1st, at the beginning of the new year, we do see, and this is a statistically significant decline, overall buzz. Have you heard something positive or negative about a destination? When we ask that to the US across these markets, we're now in a net negative environment, which you don't want to be in. Now, silver lining on the next slide. Consideration didn't take that big of a hit. So when we think of it in terms of, all right, so in terms of the US as effectively as a destination or a brand, not that good. We're not doing great in terms of what people think about us. But when we talk about purchase funnel, so we're looking at travel purchase funnel for consideration, which is among these destinations, where are you considering? We're not seeing a very steep decline for the US. There's just a little bit of drop. Same thing when we look at top choice, which effectively is kind of the places you're considering, where's your next trip? Where are you going next? So we're seeing flat data for US, which is very encouraging. So it's, hey, we're not doing that great in terms of overall, how the inter global companies, or I'm sorry, interglobal visitors think of us. But when we look at it in terms of, are you still going to come visit? We're doing a little bit better.
Yeah, and I would just say, I don't know if it's very encouraging, but it's not discouraging. Maybe it's
Yeah.
encouraging,
Yeah.
but yeah.
And we're seeing some stuff on Slack. I know Bilal's looking, and I think it was Aaron that was asking, when's the last time we saw negative overall buzz in the US? We'll go back and see if we can dig that up on the back end of this call, or worst case, we could always follow up with TTRA with that data. So great question. Thank you for chirping up on the chat. Now, what we're looking at is, okay, we looked at aggregate. Let's look at some of those individual markets. This is in terms of overall impression for the United States. So again, what do people think about? And we're looking at pre-election impressions. So that we kind of ran it before the election, and then now running it at post the election. What we're seeing is overall impression increasing for India, Egypt, UAE, China, Saudi Arabia. Not our typical allies, you would say, in terms of who we're typically friendly with from an international perspective. But this is the data. This is what it says. These are some of the markets where people are thinking a little bit more positively of the United States. If we go a little deeper on the next slide, I think we look at actual consideration. So think of this again, we're in the purchase funnel. People are thinking about, hey, would I travel to the United States? And what we do see, we see a little bit of increase in change. There's not a crazy amount of change in terms of positive, but we're seeing France, Thailand, Italy, China, and India again. So a few, not the usual suspects we would think to be up there, but we are seeing some different markets popping up. And Brian, I can't remember if you had some additional thoughts.
I had a few on the next slide, which was the top choice.
All right, cool. So let's get into that one. Okay. So top choice. All right, you're in market, you're considering travel. Where are you going to go? Australia, Germany, Finland, Switzerland, and again, India. So now we're seeing some other markets that maybe haven't popped up. Hopefully, the DMOs that are on this call, you guys have some active campaigns, tourism campaigns in some of these markets, and we're going to see a little bit of an increased bounce because we do see more people planning to come over here. So hopefully some effective marketing going on.
Yeah, and what I was going to add was that, especially I think at least the top four here, we're all pretty low in our ranking right after the election of our likelihood to visit, basically. So you saw steep drops in likelihood to visit in Germany and Switzerland. I think Australia was kind of in the minus 30% range. So people aren't considering it, but the people who are considering it are more likely to be considering it, which is kind of interesting.
Yeah. I'm going to quickly pause to answer a couple questions. Nikki, have you seen similar trends after previous elections? That I know of. I've only been at YouGov for 6+ years. The last election, I don't think we saw some of the stuff that we're going to see in the back end of this presentation. I would say we haven't seen. I would say some of this is unique. Absolutely, you're going to see shifts, but we're seeing some really unique stuff happening, which we'll get into. And then, can we look at other segmentations? Travelers to the north versus southern states? We can. Some of this is not as directly. We want to look at the aggregate and make this impactful to everyone that's on the call. This is stuff that we could happily take a look at, see if we could cut it in different ways to look at a little bit more closely at your specific DMA. Some of it we wouldn't even have in our syndicated tool, but we'd be happy to try to help build that for you. And Kevin, we're going to get to it, so hang in there. Next slide, Brian. Let's do it. I think this is okay. This is all you, sir. Good luck.
Yeah, this is interesting. I'll say that. So we went back to basically Great Britain, Mexico, and Canada, and we asked that same question that we asked in December, again in February. So after the new administration had taken office, and effectively what we're seeing, at least in Britain, is that there is a stronger extreme negative response to wanting to visit. We see a 7 percentage point increase in much less likely. It's a bit of a tongue twister. Basically, people went from being neutral about it is where most of the movement was to being more negative on the US. And again, this is consideration. This is a nat rep audience. We saw earlier that the travelers are slightly less affected, but that's what we saw when we asked this again. When you split out by gender, and this goes back to 2021. So I think someone earlier asked what we were seeing kind of previous elections. So we're seeing a pretty similar point to where we were in January 2021, which was when the last administration took office. It was also around COVID, so that is another variable that is not in play here. Hopefully, at least, fingers crossed. I don't want to jinx anything, but basically, we're kind of back to where we were about 4 years ago. And you'll see, and this actually started before the new administration or before the election even, that there was a divergence between men and women in impression in Great Britain of the US, and that's bigger than it was at any point, really. Moving forward to consideration, again, we're seeing that gap widen slightly, but not really in the grand scheme of things, hasn't changed that much consideration among Brits to visit the US. And then top choice, we see a pretty wide gap here between men and women, and it has widened after the election. Moving forward to Mexico, there were questions about this in the chat, specifically around tariffs. We didn't ask, do you feel like tariffs are impacting your travel? But that is something that has happened in between December 2024 and February 2025. And we are seeing a more extreme response among Mexicans than we saw among Brits. So here we're seeing that 55% of Mexicans are less likely to consider visiting the US than they were even 2 months ago, that was, I think, 36% said that at the time. And those are concentrated, not just somewhat less likely, but it's much less likely. So we have 14 percentage point increase in much less likely after just 2 months.
And I'm just responding to questions, so you keep going. This is good. People are asking a bunch of stuff we're trying.
I could just be, I'm in my room, I'm talking to the computer. I very well could just be talking to myself, but no, I know you're there. I know people are there. Net impression of US as a travel destination. And again, this is the Gen Pop audience. This is not the traveler audience. So again, we saw in December when we asked this that the passport holders did not have this, but the impression of the US among the average audience of Mexicans is dropping. We're seeing it cross that 0 threshold. This is impression. It's the net metric that Kenton was talking about. So we asked people, do you have a positive or negative view of these destinations? Do you have a positive or negative view of these destinations? And you kind of combine the positive and the negative responses. So we are entering the negatives. Again, this is a snapshot in time. We don't know if it's going to continue, We can just show you what has happened, what people have said. We can make, projections. I think, I'm not going to say what caused this, but I feel like, someone in the chat earlier made a suggestion that would not be out of the question as to why someone might be having a worse impression of the U.S. Consideration, again, you're seeing a little bit of shift, but it's gone up and down over the last couple of years. Not as much of an impact, similar to what we were seeing before, that impression dropping, consideration, purchase intent, or top choice maintaining. And this is the top travel destination choice. So again, it's kind of hovered around that 10% range for the last probably 4 years. And it's higher than it was when Trump took office, or I guess left office in January 2021. And finally, Canada. So Canada, we're seeing a very, very negative response to the US, which again, I think that in December of 2024, that was when we ran the survey initially, that was prior to discussions around potentially acquiring Canada, calling Justin Trudeau governor, things that people in Canada seem to take offense to. And that is playing out in the impression, or I guess this is a consideration question, but that's playing out in the data too. So just 2 months later, we're seeing, 53% of Canadians are much less likely to consider a US visit. And that was at 33% just 2 months ago. If you look at the net total, we're at about 63% say they're less likely compared to 45% 2 months ago. So that, again, 20% increase or percentage point increase in Canadians who say that they are less likely to visit the United States. Now, when we zoom in on this, we also ask people how often they travel internationally. So basically, we're seeing two views here. On the left is how often they travel internationally. And then on the right is the green segment. It's people who travel at least once a year. And then of that green segment, of the people who travel at least once a year, how likely they are to visit the US. So I think I mentioned on the last slide, it was around 65% negative. Here, 53% negative. So better, but still not good. I don't think that you want to see 50% of potential travelers say they're less likely to visit a destination. Kenton, I feel like I'm saying too mean of things, so I want you to cut me off.
No, don't be mean. It's fine. And, we would say this. So keep in mind, again, you're looking on the left. So the left is, hey, show us those two sections in green. These are the actual people that travel internationally. And then we look at that second box and we see the 53%. So people that do travel internationally, half of them are saying much less likely planning to travel. Alarming, like definitely concerning. The other caveat is this is happening right now in real time. It's almost like US is having a destination brand health crisis to a small extent. So not great right now, but if we were to look at this in a few weeks, we're hoping that we see some of this level off. Cooler heads prevail, things of that nature. Like right now, we're just in the middle of things. Some of these effectively inflammatory comments have just happened. So right now we're kind of seeing this, no, I wouldn't go there. But hey, things could change in a month. Things can change in a few months.
Yeah, and one other thing too that I know that we have been asked about a little bit that we could get data on. We don't have it in this presentation, but obviously the World Cup is going to be shared among Mexico, Canada, and the United States next summer. So that's the type of destination event that someone might overlook. I don't really feel this positively about the United States, but I've got to go support my team at the World Cup. It's a good excuse to visit. So I think something that I won't go too far down that rabbit hole, but there are positives that maybe despite what the data is suggesting would lead to eventual international travel.
Yep. Quick one to Julie. You're saying here, I think a lot of Europeans, they don't understand the vastness of US geography. We would agree with that. Like it's those memes the European mind cannot comprehend. Yeah, I mean, we're a big country and there's a lot of things that are regional. So again, we're taking a look at it we want to look at overall national consent and then we can figure out ways, if folks find this interesting, always happy to look at ways that we can get some of this content, make it more actionable for your region or for your DMO specifically.
So we'll get into a bit more data on Canada, and then I do think that you have actually some data that speaks to that question specifically in the next section. But just among international travelers, so these are people who take a trip at least one a year. Or they're planning a trip, an international trip in the next month. So slightly different methodology because this is coming from that destination index tool, the syndicated daily destination tracker, versus the last one, which was an omnibus survey. But basically, what we're seeing is that, as you know, probably not a surprise, impression of the United States as a travel destination among Canadians has dropped. It didn't happen after the election. It actually went up a bit, or at least kind of was neutral, if nothing else. But in the last probably month and a half, 2 months, it has fallen.
And the other part on that one, like again, this is concerning. So we've got data through yesterday. In this slide, I think Brian and I, like Brian, I'll say, was preparing it maybe just a few days ago. So we were in the office last week looking at this, and you do see we've gone net negative for overall impression, which again is not great. And this is, it's still trending down. So that's the part where it's like, oof, not great, but it's still early. Things can change. Things can shift.
Yeah, and we are seeing consideration drop a bit as well. Again, it wasn't after the election, it was after some of the inflammatory comments, and that doesn't mean the inflammatory comments caused it. There could be a variety of reasons, but we do see a clear decline from the first time that it was introduced that Canada become a state in the United States. So take from that what you will. We don't want to say this is exactly what's causing this, but it would not be unreasonable to jump to that conclusion. And it has gone back up too. So, I mean, I think there's something to be said too about not feeling like it's too, not getting too caught up in the moment, but still worth monitoring. And then this is the top choice. So again, you see a decline around that time as well, but you still see international travelers are, having more positive views of visiting or more likelihood to visit than the average Canadian, which makes sense because they are travelers. And so all that said, I wouldn't say the bad news, but that's the news that you can interpret one way or the other. And I will pass it to Kenton for a little bit of a palate cleanser.
Yes. And then this one, it's, hey, a little bit lighter. So we have this global travel profiles tool. It looks at all sorts of different things, and we can look at attitudes on travel, really get inside the consumer mindset. We kept some simple ones here. The first one, when we're considering international travel, and this is looking at folks, again, aggregate across all those 29 markets where we look specifically at track the US, we see, price of travel, work, price of accommodations, but then boom, number 4 on the list, safety. That's something to keep an eye on as well. Like, we don't want to see that. We want people to think of the US as very safe. That's something that's kind of popped up a bit. We do have that data historically. We could go back and look at it. The other part is, all this stuff, no one knows your destination like you guys, right? No one knows it like you do. The way that you market, the way that you're doing it, keep doing it the right way, and things are going to work out. When we have this, you just got to keep in mind for international travelers, when you look at this, a lot of them, they're not necessarily looking for last minute deals. There's probably like a little over 30% that, hey, yeah, I'll look for a last minute deal. The reality is a big chunk are also, I am planning this way in advance. So now we're going to have to see all these people that have planned their trip. Like, are they going to make it? Are they going to come? Or are we still going to see traffic? These are kind of open-ended questions that we hope, again, this is a blip in the radar, right? This is a little beep, and then we're going to be okay. But it's, it's something to be concerned about. It's something to monitor carefully. And then I think we just had one other simple one to close on. There's a bunch of other cool stuff we could pull. Actually, we have a couple more. Just keep in mind, it's, when people are coming to the US, hey, I want to go to a beach. I want to relax, but I also maybe want to do some sightseeing. I want to be active, and hopefully I want to spend some money in a city as well. Like, those are kind of the key three things. So folks, when they're on vacation, they want to do those same things that we're used to. And then also, we do see the data doesn't lie. Like, a lot of people really want to be, that are coming to the US, they're planning to be active. So, this is just good stuff, good reminders when we're thinking in terms of what are we putting on our website? How are we building our materials? What is our outward facing view of who we are as a DMO? These are just good things to keep in mind as you're planning for that international segment of your core travel market.
Yeah,
And
and
with
again, this is what people say they want to do. I will go on vacation. I want to go do exercise, and I get on vacation, and then maybe I don't want to do exercise once I'm there.
good stuff, Brian. And then like I
That's
think we had one
adding
more,
insights. Yeah.
like one more. This is a simple one. You know, where do you, yeah, a lot of people want, where do you want to, what do your accommodations look like? Sure, I want to stay in a luxury resort. I want to stay in a nice hotel. This goes back to that first slide when we saw that there was a 3% increase in the younger generations looking to travel. You'll see things popping up like a hostel, a campsite. There's interesting things like, hey, be aware of that. There's people looking to do not necessarily traditional type travel. So, be cognizant of that. Again, when you're trying to outreach to this younger market, not everyone wants to experience your DMO in the same way. So we hope this is helpful. We hope this was enjoyable. We are still here. We wanted to end this early. We just appreciate some people taking 30 minutes of their lives to listen to us. Thank you so much. YouGov appreciates TTRA, everyone that's here. We are going to do our best. I think we've answered most of the questions. I see it. I'm going to go to the Q&A. And then, Sarah, if you see anything that we haven't missed, if anyone wants to speak up, add to the chat, we'll keep working on it. So visa wait times likely to impact FIFA. Yep. Interesting. Any news on intent on legislation? So visa wait times will likely impact FIFA visitation. Big worry among our hotels. We won't know the countries until December. Any news on intent or legislation? Us directly, we have not gotten to that or studied that specifically. We could go back to some of our research leads and see if they have any insights on that. But yeah, great question, and good that you're calling it out. What else, Brian? What are we seeing?
I haven't really kept up, but I know that Bilal on our team, who does a lot of the client servicing, I think he was at Marketing Outlook Forum, so maybe people met him in January, but he's been answering a lot of questions in the chat, and he lives
Yep.
and breathes in this data, so he's an expert. And thank you, Bilal, for doing that work, because it's nerve-wracking to be here and talking to the computer.
No, it's not, Brian. Come on.
Yeah, no, we're having fun.
Anonymous attendee. Intent data is interesting. Do you have any booking data from OTAs? Just full transparency. We're panel based, we're a surveys research firm, so we're not actually going to collect specific bookings data. We won't have that directly. We actually do track OTAs, like just in terms of general, those same KPIs, like do people like booking.com versus this one? We track that, but we're not tracking those directly. Missed the opening. Yeah, we're going to share the deck. Again, there should be a link after this. We're going to share the deck. We really appreciate that. Are there any countries who seem to benefit from the shift away from the US? Brian, how would you answer that one?
I would say yes. I don't know what they are off the top of my head, but I know that we could figure that out, and maybe
Okay.
that's the topic of a future one.
And then here's this. So let's make that a segue. We'll answer two questions. Nikki, thank you for asking all these questions. Any possibility you continue to update or share the data? It seems like over 100 people attended today. Like, thank you so much. Let's figure out if we could do something. I don't want to push Brian too hard because he put a lot of work into this, but I think we would be happy to kind of look at some of this stuff ongoing if there's interest. And I think definitely just note a lot of the things that we looked at specifically across Destination Index. It's a daily tracker. We can look at that continuously. It's when we want to dig into like a specific DMO. We do, that's the stuff that we can't just happily provide, but we're very open to doing that.
Yeah, I think something that came up, we were going through this, what maybe it was like this morning or last night. We were asking, how is this impacting actual destinations that we track, and we didn't look into that, so it was a little late to kind of change everything up. But I wonder if it's a case of people don't want to, not don't want to, but they have this feeling about the parent brand, the United States, but some of the other brands within it, and maybe using the word parent kind of is a triggering phrase for some types, but you know what I mean, like the overarching brand, and then the states, the specific destinations, or the regions or the cities, that maybe it's like, I don't want to visit the US, but I want to visit Nashville.
Yep. Michelle, I'm so sorry. I'm like in the chat, and can we assume national park cuts will impact this further? I mean, I think you can assume it, but we like to live in the data. So this is something we could take a look at and maybe even look at an iteration because we're asking some of those questions. But I think you're spot on there. Kari, do you plan to ask people, Canadians, to specify what's causing this decline? So within this, we weren't looking, you could think of it as kind of a destination barrier. We call it brand barriers. A lot of the work I do is with brand barriers. Why do you not go to Taco Bell? Because I don't like your food. Like, why do this is something we could ask. I don't think that we have asked it, but the next iteration of this survey, this is something we could definitely look into. We could actually talk to our Canadian counterparts. We've got a full team in Canada too, see if they can help as well. But good question. And then Kristen, just curious if you'll be doing a presentation about the Trump effect on US travel to Canada. I think we kind of hit that. Like hopefully part of that was in there. On US travel. Oh, they're vice
US
versa. We're not planning to, but it's something like if there's people that are, we'll see how well this is received. We could do anything like pretty interesting. And thank you just for even mentioning it. And I'll leave it at this. Like Brian, it looks like we got a lot of questions. I know that we have a special message from TTRA that we want to be respectful of. I know that we're going to get this list of questions after the fact. We're going to do our best to hit these up. Like, does Japan didn't pop. We are looking at that in Japan. It didn't pop in these specific surveys. We'll do our best to answer all these questions, but we want to kick it back to Sarah, TTRA, for that special message. Okay.
That sounds good with me. There is no rush on our end. We do have the full hour if you would like to tackle any more that you see. If not, like Kenton said, he will get a copy of all these questions and he will answer them. But totally up to you guys. We can definitely take it away from here if you're comfortable with that.
Take it away.
Okay, sounds good. Well, I just want to thank everyone so much for coming, for being so interactive in the chat with all the questions and stuff. And thank you so much to Brian, Kenton, Bilal in the chat. It was very, very helpful. And it was definitely a topic that a lot of people find important. So we really appreciated it today. And like I said in the beginning, just to wrap things up, we have one last message from TTRA with our exciting new opportunities for our members. It's just a quick 1-minute video, so I'll go ahead and share that now. Just have to get the chat out of my way.
Hi, everyone. I'm Whitney Nollenberg.
And I'm Anna Blunt. We're the founding co-chairs of the TTRA Think Tank Task Force, which is now evolving into the TTRA Think Tank and Member Webinar Task Force.
We're so excited to share more about this new initiative and how you can be a part of it.
The webinar you just watched is part of this program, which is soft launching in 2025. As a member-driven organization, TTRA is always looking for more and new ways to help our community share their knowledge and insights. And this is one more avenue for you.
The Think Tank and Member Webinar Program creates opportunities for both academic and practitioner members to present their ideas in a 15 to 30-minute webinar. Whether it's your original research findings, case studies, or emerging trends, this is your space to share and spark conversations.
If you have an idea for a webinar you'd like to present, we'd love to hear from you. Just email your concept to us at memberwebinar@ttra.com and we'll be in touch.
We can't wait to see the amazing insights our members will bring to this program.
Thank you so much for being a part of TTRA.
We look forward to hearing from you.
Thank you so much, everybody. Again, if you're interested in submitting a webinar opportunity, that was memberwebinar@ttra.com. You can always also reach out to the admin at ttra.com as well. I did see a few more questions trickling in, so if you guys, Brian, Kenton, want to interrupt me at any time, that's perfectly fine. But like we said, we will have the copy of the questions and we will get them back to you. And you will hear more about it from us in the future.
Literally, just thank you so much again for making this happen. Hopefully this was additive to everyone's day, and everyone get through it. Have a good rest of your week. Have a great weekend.
Thank you.